Welcome to this Sunday service with the Eno River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. This delayed service, we're sorry that we've had technical difficulties, but we're so glad that we worked it out and you're watching us now. I'm Reverend Deborah Cayer, whoever you are, wherever you come from, whomever you love, whatever your race, your gender, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, welcome. We're so glad that you are finding out more about us through the link on our website or through the little notice, the link in our chat box on your screen. Regularly during this time, we're offering an inquirer's class. You could find out more about us. You can check our website for more information and we'll send you a link that way. You can sign up to get a link. There's a virtual coffee hour usually after the service. We'll see how that goes today. On Wednesday nights, this coming Wednesday night, we're having a coffee house, a virtual coffee house. Pam Dillavore is hosting that. Check our website for the link to get to that coffee house on Wednesday night. Our Odyssey program starts the last Sunday in June at 9 o'clock. It's a wonderful program. Check out our website to find out about the members who are going to tell their stories each Sunday, a different person. That morning, the last Sunday in June, we are also attending General Assembly's live worship service. Check out our website and e-news for information about how to find that on the last Sunday in June. That same Sunday at 1 o'clock, we are having our annual meeting online. And so to get ready for that, today at noon and also Monday night at 7, we are hosting a budget forum. It's a chance for members to hear about the thinking that went into this year's complicated budget scenarios and ask questions and give us their thoughts and ideas. Now is the time for that. We have plenty of time. In this service, we're going to hear from Reverend Stacy and Dr. LeLaina Romero about important things to which we ought never be reconciled and how we find wholeness as we work for justice. And so together, let's just take a breath and center ourselves. We're going to continue with the prelude. This is a piece arranged by Kate Lewis based on the compositions Strange Fruit by Abel Meerpool and Black and Blue by Razaf, Waller, and Brooks. And Stacy has our opening words for us today.
These opening words are by Arianto Nugroho. A presence summons hearts from all ages, whole, holy. They answered the summons humbly to find light. They saw, tasted, and lived the sparks, and proclaimed brilliance to the shadows. They did not brag of prosperity, nor tout their shining intellect, nor use some mighty gift of power. Simplicity of heart was their only gift. Now the summons sounds again, a still small voice for singular people, whose honest hearts opened, filled with love for neighbors, which is love for God. Do we hear the still small voice? Can we respond with our lives? Will we join the gathering ranks to reflect the light of presence into a confused world?
We light our chalice this morning. The symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith and the transforming power of truth and love, which light our way and fill our lives with meaning, confidence, and hope. Our first hymn today is Now Let Us Sing.
Cayer, the Director of Religious Education here at the Eno River UU Fellowship. Good morning. Good morning, self. Try saying that to yourself. Good morning, Julia. There's an expert researcher in the field of neurochemistry and self-compassion named Shauna Shapiro. And she has a book called Good Morning, I Love You. She invites everyone to begin their day with a practice of self-compassion by starting off saying, good morning, self, I love you. And asking, how are you doing? How is your own heart doing? How is my heart? I've got 5 practices for your spirits and mental health in 5 minutes here. So self-compassion, number 1. Number 2, outdoors. Open up a door, open up a window. Research has shown us that after 4 minutes, our brains start producing beneficial chemicals in response to being outside. So it's worth your time to just open up a window right now. 3, physical movements. So we're going to do one right now. Posture of joy. Bring your hands up, out, up. Invite in joy. Just be receptive to it. Usually our minds are in charge of our bodies, but we're going to help our bodies lead our minds right now. So posture of joy. Bring your hands up. And then another one. You're going to bring the sides of your lips out towards your ears. You're going to invite in joy. This isn't about if you're already feeling happy and expressing it on your face. This is about helping your body take the lead to guide your mind. Mind-body connection. Fourth, now offer up your hands. So our hands are symbolic of our gifts, our contributions, our service. And they are physical means of translating our inner values out into the world. So take all of that and offer it up. Offer it all up. Our contributions, our gifts, ourselves. Offer it up. Service, our helping hands. And finally, gratitude. This is number 5. Think of something for which you are grateful. All of these mini practices here are tools you can use for mental health and for spiritual support. So again, self-compassion, morning I love you. Open up the windows and get outside. Mind-body connection, moving your body to support your mind. And then service, or helping hands, can be a really positive way of supporting our spirits and supporting others at the same time. And then lastly, gratitude. So blessings to you, blessings to your loved ones, and blessings to all people everywhere in this extraordinarily difficult time. Amen.
In Ella's song, Sweet Honey and the Rocks sing, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of Black men, Black mothers' sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons." How long it's taken for white Americans to see the reality behind these words. And yet, even as for the first time, the majority of Americans have begun to awaken to from this nightmare, to a better understanding of what's truly going on and has gone on in our country. Even as we awaken, this past Friday night in Atlanta, another Black man, Rayshard Brooks, was killed by the police in what otherwise might have been a routine arrest had Brooks been white. We who believe in equality, racial equity, and justice cannot rest until it comes. We cannot stop. We cannot take our eyes off the prize. We cannot stop working for justice. We have to keep going the long distance to change everything. And here's the paradox. Because as countless African American healers have pointed out, in order to stay with this great work of dismantling white supremacy, to stay with the fight for racial justice, at times, the people who are most affected have to rest, have to pause, have to acknowledge and breathe out and shake out, let go of trauma in order to be whole in mind, in body, and soul. That's what we want at the end of the fight for freedom, is wholeness. Because what good is freedom if you're too shattered to use it in service of love and goodness, starting with yourself? This is true in different ways from all of us, for all of us, depending on our social location. But in order to stay in the struggle for justice, we have to care for ourselves in body, mind, and soul. And the larger wholeness that we seek for our society begins in our bodies. Later this morning in this service, LeLaina Romero will speak to us about all of this. LeLaina is a licensed psychologist who puts justice work for community healing at the center of her practice with individuals. You may know her as ERUF's director of the Beloved Community Chorus. That's an inclusive group that sings songs of justice and healing as an embodied spiritual practice. They sing about the world that they believe is possible, and they are making a way for it to happen in their singing, in the way that they live. So we're going to begin with the body. Reverend Stacy Grove also is a healer who works with us as our consulting minister for pastoral care. In the Jewish tradition, Shalom means peace, but at its root, the word really means wholeness. A wholeness that takes in everything as it is and then transforms it through inner work and through community work into justice, which is the necessary condition for any true lasting peace. Stacy offers us these thoughts as she applies the concept of wholeness and shalom to the movement for Black lives.
50 years ago, in July of 1970, I vividly recall my arrival to Durham from the north, driving along Gregson Street with the beautiful willow oaks lining the road. I wondered just what those old trees had witnessed of Southern living. 2 weeks later, I drove to visit the coast. I was shocked when I entered Johnston County, and before my eyes was a billboard that said, quote, "This is Klan country, love it or leave it. We fight communism and integration." Whoa, every part of my being contracted in that moment. I did not know what to do with that visceral feeling that welled up inside me so intensely. I did not know, but my body knew deep within me that something was not right here. As a young white woman, I recognized I was touching the reality of racism viscerally rather than intellectually. I entered a new awareness through the fear and uncertainty I had just experienced. 57 years ago, on June 11th, 1963, John F. Kennedy addressed our nation with words that framed the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. He said in part, "The fires of frustration and discord are burning in every city. Redress is sought in the streets, in demonstrations, parades, and protests. We face a moral crisis as a country and as a people. It cannot be met by repressive police action. It cannot be left to increase demonstrations in the streets. It cannot be quieted by token moves and talk. It is a time to act. Great change is at hand, and our task, our obligation, is to make that revolution, that change, peaceful and constructive for all. Those who do nothing are inviting shame as well as violence." Well, at one level, it may seem that we are back where we were 50 plus years ago, and yet we are not. We are stronger than ever before in our efforts to dismantle the systems that diminish a human being because of his or her color. We are spiraling forward as we are circling back We've experienced both peace and unrest during these many years, and we continue speaking out and showing up for justice. We are at another growing edge in the evolution of loving one another as one desires to be loved. There's been scarring, there's been needless suffering, and as we've seen amazingly in recent protests, there's been truth-telling on the part of protesters and listening on the part of police and city leaders. This is the beginning of new relationships. This is the beginning of healing. This is the beginning of a new and greater wholeness. May we each do our part in tipping the scales of justice, and let us stand together, witnesses for one another, as we walk humbly and aligned with an open heart into the movement of Black lives. When someone asked the prophet Micah what the spiritual law required of them, the prophet replied, "What is required of you is that you act justly, love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." Let the healing continue, one breath at a time, as we travel together with justice, compassion, and humility into a larger love and a greater wholeness, a greater shalom that comes when we create a world in which Black lives truly do matter. This next piece is Balm in Gilead by Sweet Honey in the Rock.
There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Sometimes I feel discouraged, and I think my work's in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot preach like Paul, you can to save us all. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul.
May the wounded be made whole, and may all that separates us from what is most holy be healed. A few weeks ago, Deb mentioned mental health as something important to reflect on and engage in as we explore compassion. I said I have some things to share. And as I sat to write about mental health and wholeness, almost 3 months into mostly staying at home with my family, my heart is heavy. I'm talking about the actual place where my heart lives, this part of my body from below my neck down to my stomach. This is a long time to be flooded with uncertainty, illness, loss, and more. A global pandemic and social and physical distancing alone would be enough, and even before George Floyd was killed. The small and large ways we have been living that just don't serve and care for all people and our earth were being laid bare over and over. Some folks noticing for the first time, some folks not surprised, some folks still not seeing. All of us impacted. So I'm a licensed psychologist as well as a musician. So I'm interested in mental health. It's deeply connected to my calling. But when I talk about mental health, I'm not talking about labels and diagnoses that we may be familiar with, like anxiety and depression. These labels do help us describe our experiences, and some of us struggle with these more than others. But as psychotherapy has evolved, our culture has focused on these experiences as if they are completely inside of us, our genes, our brains, disconnected from our surroundings. Medical and mental health systems have aided this focus. We are anxious, we are depressed, we are bipolar. They've become identities and often stigmatized ones. This takes our focus away from the causes of these struggles, especially for those of us who have been traumatized by continual deprivation and oppression. What state of mental health do we expect in this world? These are the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There are some things in our nation and in our world to which I'm proud to be maladjusted. I never intend to adjust myself to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to become adjusted to religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few and leave millions of people perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of prosperity. I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism and to the self-defeating effects of physical violence. And I call upon you to be maladjusted to these things until the good society is realized, Yes, I must confess that I believe firmly that our world is in dire need of a new organization, the International Association for the Advancement of Creative Maladjustment. Through such maladjustment, we will be able to emerge from the bleak and desolate midnight of man's inhumanity to man into the bright and glittering daybreak of freedom and justice. These words were spoken in 1966 when he gave the Ware Lecture at the Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly gathering in Florida. So, are you struggling right now? More than you were 3 months ago? Are you having trouble sleeping, maybe having nightmares, feeling numb, having racing thoughts of worry that you can't control? Were you struggling before the pandemic, and now you don't even know what the next move is? We pour our compassion over you. We are with you in your suffering. You are not alone. I am here beside you. You are not alone. I am here now. We are not alone. We are here together. We are not alone. We are here now. Melanie Demore. I pray that you do not add layers of judgment over this suffering. We're social beings, some of us in different ways, but of course these times are going to impact us. And going to the places where it hurts, that's what's needed to heal and transform, but not alone. We need care. If you're struggling in ways that you can't find comfort for or relief from, please talk to our ministers so that they can support you and connect you to some resources. Though our medical and mental health systems struggle the same way all our institutions do, there are helpful resources out there. There are therapists and others who get the context we're in. You don't have to do this alone. The wisdom of those working for justice, feminist and womanist activists and scholars, family therapists, social workers. This wisdom's being confirmed by neuroscience, exposing the reality that we are shaped by environment in all ways. Our bodies, our brains are deeply impacted by what we experience. And yes, some of us are more prone to struggle with anxiety, big shifts in mood, psychosis, and more. And researchers still can't really separate what happens in our bodies and brains from what happens in our families and cultures. How is it that Black folks and Latina folks in this country are more likely to have asthma, diabetes, cardiovascular disease? This isn't purely genetic. This has happened over generations, and the impact of oppression on our bodies over generations is real. Psychiatrist and neuroscientist Rachel Yehuda has worked with adult children of Holocaust survivors and found that they're more likely to develop PTSD after a traumatic event and more prone to depression and anxiety. Intergenerational trauma changes our brains and bodies. And at the same time, survivors of such traumas and their descendants also show so much adaptability and resilience. We're still here. Many trauma survivors, scholars, practitioners are engaged in social justice work because they know these truths in their bones, that our wounds need deep attention and care. Simply attending to what's happening in our bodies is healing, slowing down and noticing, because where else do our emotions show up but right here? Our bodies are rich with resources and information. Resma Menachem is a trauma specialist from Minneapolis. He's a Black social worker who's a healer and author and has worked with and consulted with many groups about race and trauma, including law enforcement. In his book, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies, he says, if you are convinced that ending white supremacy begins with social and political action, do not read this book unless you are willing to be challenged. We need to begin with the healing of trauma in dark-skinned bodies, light-skinned bodies, our neighborhoods and communities, and the law enforcement profession. Social and political actions are essential, but they need to be part of a larger strategy of healing, justice, and creating room for growth in traumatized flesh and blood bodies. We are all impacted by bodies. We all have bodies, and we are all impacted by the violent inequities in our culture. All of our bodies are impacted. We cannot shield ourselves from this, though we try to defend ourselves with denial and more. So let's breathe for a moment and pay attention to the ways that your body is reacting to these words, to the room that you're in, to these times. Build these pauses into your day. Touch your heart and belly, if that feels good, those tender places to make contact with what you need. There is wisdom here. What if we cherished, respected, honored, and nurtured the most historically and currently marginalized among us? What if our resources went to care rather than consumption? To loving response rather than policing, as the movement for Black Lives is asking? What if we cherished, respected, honored, and nurtured the most wounded parts of our being, our bodies and spirits? What if we really listened to what those wounds have to tell us? Attending to our wounds, we are whole. We are worthy, deserving of the bounty of this earth and light. We are good. Your true name is beloved, Reverend Deb Cayer said on May 31st. May we know this truth, and may those of us who live in bodies that are still not protected and loved as they should be claim this at our core. She was talking to those of us living in Black and brown bodies. May we claim this in our homes, on the streets, when we look in the mirror, in our hearts. Your true name is beloved.
God calls you good, beloved child. calls you good, beloved child. You are a treasure deeply prized, and you can say to every doubting voice, life calls you good, beloved child. Life calls you good, beloved child. God calls me good, beloved child. I am a treasure deeply prized, and I can say to every doubting voice, God calls me good, beloved child. God calls me good, beloved child. We call you good, beloved child. You are a treasure deeply prized, and you can say to every doubting voice, we call you good, beloved child. We call you good, beloved child.
Life calls you good. Life calls you beloved. Would you join me in the spirit of prayer and spoken meditation? This is called A Prayer of Risk by Tamara Labak. Holy One who has filled us with the breath of life, today we remember to breathe deeply, to rest, to take in, to pause before we act. And then to take in another deep breath, poised on the edge, and risk jumping in, risk taking action, risk speaking up, risk using the gifts we have been given, so that at the end of our days, we can say with absolute clarity that no part of our existence was wasted in fear of failure or fear of success. Hold us. Prepare us the way to begin to offer the gift of our awakened presence, full of love and light today. These and the prayers of our hearts we lift up now into the silence. Today we hold in our hearts Christy Mather as she recovers from being hit by a car. Susan Heyman, Chrissy Trinello, Gino Barr, and Carolyn Lakevich as they each recover from surgery. We hold in our hearts all who show up for justice in the streets of our nation, who demand nothing less than justice from our nation's leaders. May the steady mercy and compassion at the heart of all life hold us all as we join together in this great work to make love visible and tangible in our shared public life. Ashe. Amen. May it be so. This next piece is by India R.E. called Breathe.
Love to all soul birds worldwide. This is Blue Miller. These are my new friends. Everybody say hi. Hi! So, this is our gift to you. Okay. Continue to breathe. In times like these, that's what your heart is for. Continue to breathe. Continue to breathe. In honor of your brother, that's what your heart is for. Continue to breathe. Continue to breathe. In times like these, that's what your heart is for. Continue to breathe. Continue to breathe. Last one. In honor of your brother, that's what your heart is for.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You're crying, Master. Stop it.
Again, the words of Resma Menakem. In today's America, we tend to think of healing as something binary. Either we're broken or we're healed from that brokenness. But that's not how healing operates. And it's almost never how human growth works. More often, healing and growth can take place on a continuum with innumerable points between utter brokenness and total health. In the time that I've spent as a therapist, in the time I've spent on my own healing journey, I have found over and over again that an ability to stay with what is complex or challenging, to hold the tensions between things that don't seem compatible, this is where healing lies. Spiritual wisdom and robust mental health both require holding the both ands. Healing and action are inseparable. We can still act as we heal, and we must for our actions to be loving and sustainable. Anger and love, joy and pain, fragility and strength all coexist. Cycles of change are infuriatingly slow and also overwhelmingly swift. Mortality, always knowing that we have a lifetime that will end, and living fully right now. American Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield reminds us that all spiritual traditions teach us to hold the part and the whole simultaneously. This is how we heal. We are particular and unique and also insignificant and part of a much greater mystery. Surely all of us have experienced pain, disappointment, some kind of loss in our lives. There may be some among us this morning who have not experienced fear, loss, trauma as part of their everyday lives, in their bodies, families, neighborhoods. That's a blessing. May it be so for us all. From a place of love, none of us would wish that on anyone. And yet our principles tell us that we are a part of an interconnected web. So your pain and joy matter to me, and they change me. We sing, I need you to survive. Some of us have ancestors like the Zulu people of Southern Africa who say, Ubuntu, I am because you are, or something similar. The traumas that humans have created, they come from abuses of power, callous valuing of the material over humanity and life, draining the earth of her resources, saying that some people are more deserving of respect because of skin color, bodies that look or function in particular ways, or how much wealth we have accumulated. These traumas impact us all. And we're seeing these traumas more played out on screens than ever. We all have wounds to tend to. Healing our individual and collective wounds, this is part of our spiritual work, our justice work. It's not a precursor. It's not an add-on. Healing is deeply critical if we are to be the beloved community that Dr. King talked about, not free of conflict, but full of love and with no room for hate or inequity, where we care for one another and share the earth's gifts. As we continue together in this faith community on a journey of reckoning with past and present injustices and healing our hearts together, we are called to attend to individual inherent worth and dignity and our deep connections with one another. In this moment in our country, the wounds and horrors of policing are clear, and they're connected to other wounds in prisons, detention centers, schools, meatpacking plants, warehouses, grocery stores, farms, even in our faith communities. Even in this very place. Let us remember that healing is not predictable or linear, and all people and communities need healing right now, and this takes time. Though we may feel despair, that doesn't mean we can't celebrate together when there's joy or recognition or loving transformation, even as we heal. Connecting with our bodies means feeling joy as well as pain, possibility as well as fear. In our household, we say Black Lives Matter. In our family, we say all Black lives matter. Our household is queer and brown and Black and trans and mixed and multi-generational and white. We're descendants of immigrants whose traumatic stories were not all passed down, but somehow their pain was. Descendants of poverty and struggle and violence and addiction. We are wounded and whole. We are healing and mourning and celebrating. We're ministering to Black Unitarian Universalists, losing too many loved ones, queer and trans people of color, like us, trans and non-binary folks living with HIV, ourselves. And we're singing and dancing with a spectacular child all the while. We say all Black bodies matter. Disabled, transgender, queer, non-binary, poor, Muslim, speaking any language, and dancing in any club on any night. On June 12th, 2016, in Orlando, the city where I grew up and came out as bisexual, 49 people were killed and 53 injured in a mass shooting. The Pulse, the gay bar and nightclub that I had visited a few years before, dancing to Beyonce's latest hit with beautiful queer friends. It was the second deadliest terror attack in the US after 9/11. Breathe with me. These events impact every cell in our bodies, especially those of us who share marginalized identities with those killed. How many young people with last names like mine? Luis Velma, 22 years old. Mercedes Marisol Flores, 26 years old. Xavier Serrano, 35-year-old father of a young child. Javier Jorge Reyes, 40 years old. Gilmari Rodriguez Solivan, 24 years old. All likely seeking some joy and connection and release on a Saturday night. The club's co-owner, Barbara Poma, named Pulse in honor of her brother, who died of AIDS in 1991, so that his heartbeat would live on. It was a space for local talent celebrating gay folks, responding to the broad needs of the LGBTQ community. It was not just another nightclub. Breathe with me. Feel the breath bringing in the oxygen you need, the miracle of life pulsing through your veins. We can feel both grief and gratitude, anguish and joy. Melissa Etheridge sang days after this tragedy, I am human, I am love, and my heart beats with my blood. Love will always win. Underneath the skin, everybody's got a pulse. May we look with loving and honest attention at the ways we feed the systems that hurt our siblings at the margins and ourselves. May we all be found in all of our beauty, in all of our brokenness, in all of our wholeness. May we love ourselves and one another to wholeness.
Ashe, may it be so. When we join together, we can do amazing things. We can do impossible things. We can do good things. We can do just things. This spring, our members and our friends' financial support has come together in truly generous and inspiring ways. People have especially been so generous in contributing to the minister's discretionary fund, and it now has much more money in it than it normally has. We're in good shape. This money has been given with great love. So if you find yourself unexpectedly in need of support, this loving, practical support is available for you. As you continue to find your way forward into the future, this community is traveling with you in very practical ways. So just contact me or Reverend Stacy and we'll see what we can do to help support you. Thank you for everyone who is in the process of fulfilling their annual pledge to the fellowship this year. Our year ends on June 30th, and your pledge will help ERUF now, and it will help ERUF in the future as well. So for our offering this morning, this is a video by Michael Court, who produced it, featuring some incredible Black and brown singers on the 1-year anniversary of the mass shooting at the Pulse that LeLaina was just speaking of. Here they sing "You Will Be Found" from the musical Dear Evan Hansen.
There's a place where we don't have to feel unknown. And every time that you call out, you're a little less alone. If you only say the word from across the silence, your voice is heard. Oh, someone will come running.
Our closing words today are by Aung San Suu Kyi. It is not merely enough to call for freedom, democracy, and human rights. There has to be a determination to persevere in the struggle, to make sacrifices in the name of enduring truths, to resist the corrupting influences of desire, ill will, ignorance, and fear. Unquote. When we find a way to bring our whole selves to this endeavor, our struggle and our sacrifice becomes a gift. We find community. We remember that we are beloved, truly beloved. You will be found. Blessed be. Go in peace. Do this work.